Sean, who do you think was the best hire at head coach in this year's head coaching carousel?
Well, I'm not gonna say Dennis Allen because I'm obviously a fan of the Saints. So
Yep.
I'm gonna just and honestly, he was already in house, so I'm not gonna really count Dennis Allen. So the guys, and there's two that I really actually I'm just gonna go with this one. That's Doug Peterson, with the Jaguars, and he's a guy that the Saints actually heavily considered. I would say he was probably, up to the point where they interviewed Eric Bieniemy. He was probably the second option behind Dennis Allen. He was competing for that job. He he was heavily considered. Has great ties with Sean Payton. They're great friends. He also had Louisiana ties. He used to go to ULM. He was a quarterback at ULM, which is up in Monroe, Louisiana, college up there. So he has Louisiana ties as well. So he was heavily considered to be the Saints, and I think for a young quarterback like Trevor Lawrence to have Doug Peterson, who got Nick Foles to the Super Bowl, who made Carson Wentz before he got injured, an MVP caliber player. I mean, you look at that. Also, let's not forget when he was the offense coordinator with the Chiefs. Alex Smith. Alex Smith kind of revived his career with the Chiefs. He was on another level when he went to the Chiefs. And Doug Peterson played a part in that. Because at one point, Andy Reid, you know, was he lets his offense coordinators calls the plays, run the offense. At one point he gave up on that. He let his offense coordinators. That's why you see Doug Peterson and Eric Bieniemy do so well because they run their own offense. They're not like a guy like Pete Carmichael who just sits in the back seat with Sean Payton calling everything. So Doug Peterson with Trevor Lawrence. I think that's a good hire. I think that's good for the culture there. I think it's good to revamp. And honestly, this might be a hot take, but the Jaguars could be a poor man's Bengals next year. I think, with the right pieces, the right culture, bringing a good coaching staff, they could be a playoff contending team, if they play the cards right. I'm just saying because Trevor Lawrence, sure, bad year, but an awful coach in Urban Meyer. He did not get much support. So I'm just saying, you add a few pieces, you might see a Bengal type season with the Jaguars. Now, I'm not saying like a magical season, but maybe a contending team to make the playoffs. Because as far as I know, you got the Titans, you got the Colts, but you can't be any worse than the Texans, right? So
Yep.
that's two teams to beat. If you maybe just beat out one of those teams, the Colts or the which I think you could beat out the Colts, maybe not the Titans. You come in second in that division, you very may make the playoffs because that Titans and Colts are playoff teams. Even though I believe the Colts barely missed the playoffs because they lost to the Jaguars. So I thought Doug Peterson was probably the best hire. Number two, I was gonna say Josh McDaniels. With him and David Carr, I think that's what the Carr really needed. So, but I'm gonna go with Doug Peterson, best hire.
Interesting. Kyle, what about you?
I think that it's really hard to tell, right? Because none of these guys, for the most part, they've had some experience in other places, but nobody's really had a track record of any tremendous success, with the exception of Doug Peterson. But then he's taking over arguably the worst situation, right, in Jacksonville, which is just a complete mess at this time. And Sean, I like your analysis. A good coaching staff can do a lot, and not only a good coaching staff, but when we talk about the likes of a Tennessee Titans and we talk about the likes of a Indianapolis Colts, something that those teams both have in common is that everything is right on those teams with the exception of the quarterback, and that's huge. That was a huge deterrent upon the Colts being a way better team than they were and missing the playoffs. And that was a huge reason why the Bengals are sitting here in the Super Bowl, is because Ryan Tannehill gifted 3 beautiful balls to the Bengals defense that were just awful throws on each and every one because of quarterback play and quarterback decision. But I think that the position with the highest upside, I think when you break it down, and this is banking on a lot here, but just to be different, is I think it's got to be Nathaniel Hackett. And for me, it's Nathaniel Hackett because of who's tied to Nathaniel Hackett. If you get Aaron Rodgers, that's automatically the win. That's automatically the win because no matter what people want to argue, that team is going to have a better record than any other team that we're talking about right now that got a new head coach. That's just a bottom line fact. Again, they're playing in a tight division. You got Justin Herbert, you got Derek Carr, you got Patrick Mahomes. But with that stellar defense, and we see they got some skill players on that team just not being utilized right in a proper offensive system, just not being utilized right because they don't necessarily have the elite quarterback play that Aaron Rodgers would bring to the table. But Javonte Williams in his first year rookie running back is a great running back. Absolutely trucks people. You look at that receiving core, I think that's just a ticking time bomb waiting to explode because of the fact that they got so much talent on that offense. The problem is that nobody can solidify who can do what because they don't have the right play calling there. But a quarterback will break that trend for you, and Aaron Rodgers will be that guy to do so because we see with Aaron Rodgers. Everybody likes to complain about the weapons that he's had in Green Bay. What weapons did they add this offseason, guys, on the offense that did anything? Absolutely nothing. But you know what? Still probably going to win the MVP, right? I mean, you got Devontae Adams. Don't get me wrong, phenomenal player. Outside of him, what did the Green Bay Packers do? They added Randall Cobb, but he got hurt midway through the season. Alan Lazard stepped up.
They lost
St.
Tanyan.
Brown, Marquise Valdes-Scantling. They lost Tanyan midway through the season. When you have a great quarterback, it brings out the greatness in his skill players. And that will do that in Denver if he lands there. So to say that Nathaniel Hackett will be the best one, I think it's riding on a lot, obviously. But being that, I think that's a more likely situation in terms of success rate than probably any other coach here that we're looking at right now, I would say that's probably the guy for me.
James, who do you got? So we got one for Hackett, one for Pederson.
I'm going to go with McDaniels to Vegas.
You know,
I liked what Sean said earlier, that Derek Carr just needs somebody to kind of help him. The last season, the last few seasons, it's been a bumpy road for him between in Oakland playing on a baseball field, then going to Vegas, and then in this brand new stadium that looks like that's phenomenal out there, to then having his head coach that's signed for him pretty much for his career for 10 years gets, nope, you're gone. Sorry, you can't even coach anymore. Gets yanked out from under him. Goes as far as he does this season to have an interim head coach that's on the team that actually did pretty well, in my opinion, stepping up and taking the team and helping Carr evolve more. By having McDaniels, I think it's just only going to help Derek Carr excel. You're going to see that Vegas team take 2 to 3 steps forward this year. You're not going to see them fall back. They're in a correct mind space of everything. Yes, they had injuries. Their number one wide receiver had that incident. You know, they were plagued with different incidents throughout the season, but having McDaniels come in, kind of like fresh start, is only going to help Carr and the rest of that young team to excel, where next year they might be a quiet team that makes a run that a lot of people may not be looking into.
I like that pick, James, because the Raiders were the only playoff team that got a new head coach. Obviously,
Yeah.
Rich Bisaccia is headed to be the special teams coordinator
Yeah.
for the Green Bay Packers. Now, what started this trend, especially this offseason? There are 5 new head coaches, all these offensive minds being hired as head coaches. Everybody wants the next Sean McVay.
Mm-hmm.
My pick is centered around this, and you all know who it already is. It's Kevin O'Connell for the Minnesota Vikings, and here's why. You have 2 outstanding receivers in Jefferson and Thielen. You have Kirk Cousins, who just made it to the Pro Bowl. I still think he can be a top 10 quarterback in this league, especially with that receiving core. They were missing their starting tight end all season long, and they have a top 3 to 4 running back in Dalvin Cook, right? And the defense improved in year number 2 of this new scheme. They lost a couple players. They lost Jeff Gladney, but they still have Dalvin Tomlinson. They have Eric Kendricks. They have Harrison Smith. They they've developed Cameron Dantzler into a decent corner. But O'Connell followed McVay. He was with McVay in Washington in 2017. Or he took over for McVay. He was the quarterback's coach. Then he eventually got promoted to Washington's offensive coordinator in 2019. And now he's been with the Rams ever since. I think he's the most similar to McVay due to his connection with him. And McVay, in 5 years of being a head coach in the NFL, has been to 2 Super Bowls already.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I like Kevin O'Connell as the best hire here for Minnesota. And what's crazy is he's probably the least known out of all of these new head coaches. Nobody really knows, but everybody knows Doug Pederson. A lot of people have known Mike McDaniel over the last couple weeks with the Deebo Samuel stuff. You know, he's really a guy that not many people know about. So I'm going to go with Kevin O'Connell.